My master seemed preoccupied today. I have served him for 30 years, and I have never seen him like this. At times, he appeared deeply frustrated about something. At other times, I sensed a deep agitation. He was restless, walking through the house, standing on the roof, staring out over the city. He certainly was not himself. Usually, he is decisive and direct, telling us exactly what he wants done. But today he seemed unable to make a decision. Several times he walked through the kitchen. He would stop and look at me, and I stopped working, expecting him to say something, but then he would just saunter away. He stood outside in the garden just beyond the kitchen. A couple of times he called my name. I went to go to him, but when I got to the door, he would just wave me back inside. At mid-morning, several men came to visit my master. I recognized one of them. He's a rabbi and a member of the Sanhedrin. This man has met with my master several times over the last couple of months. It was unusual that he arrived so early. Usually he comes at dusk. I had never seen the other man, but he must have been from Bethany. I overheard them saying that someone would be coming from Bethany, and he seemed to know exactly who he was talking about. They met for a long time. When I took some wine in for them, they stopped talking as soon as I entered the room and said nothing the whole time I served them. I heard the two men leave. I was baking bread, and suddenly my master appeared beside me and startled me. He spoke to me with a great sense of urgency in his voice. He scribbled an address on a piece of paper and wanted me to go there immediately. "What am I to do?" I asked. "Prepare a Passover meal, but who will help me?" "Two men will meet me there, but what are their names?" "Peter and John." I made my master assure me that I would find everything I needed to prepare the meal in this upper room in the center of the holy city. He promised me that if there was anything I needed that was not there, these men, Peter and John, would get it for me. When I arrived at the house, Peter and John were already there. A man I did not know had let them in, and I could tell by their accent that they were Galilean. I soon learned that they were fishermen by trade and knew nothing about preparing a room or cooking a Passover meal. But they were eager to do anything I asked them. Everything I needed for the meal was there, except the lamb. "Where is the lamb?" I asked them. "Have you bought one? Who is going to take it to the priest at the temple? How many people will be here tonight? We have to have enough meat for everyone, but none can be left over." They looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. I yelled at them, "Get me the lamb!" And they just stood there. I pushed them toward the door, and suddenly it opened. In stepped a young man with the lamb for the Passover meal. Peter and John appeared to know him. They spoke very quietly to one another. I believe they called him John Mark, but they didn't introduce me to him. Well, for the next several hours, I worked as hurriedly as possible. At times, I told myself that my master should not expect such things from me, to prepare a Passover meal in a single afternoon. Peter and John did the best they could, but they were of little help in the kitchen. They could probably cook enough fish for 20 people over an open fire, but they knew nothing about tending an oven. As the sun went down and the shadows of the evening began to appear, people started arriving, and I instructed Peter to light some candles. One, then two, but never more than 3 men would arrive together. It seemed to me that they had been told to arrive in this manner. Finally, one they called Jesus arrived. It was evident that he was their leader. Each one embraced him and kissed him, and after a few moments, they all took their places at the table. I stood in the doorway watching them, and my eyes were drawn to this man, Jesus. He appeared so weary, like the troubles of the entire world rested on his shoulders. Yet he smiled often. Suddenly, I panicked. I realized that there was no servant present to wash the feet of these men. I ran into the back room and drew some water from the stone jar. I snatched the best towel from the ones I had used preparing the meal. As I ran back toward the room, Jesus met me in the doorway. He took the basin of water and the towel from me. I apologized to him. I protested that I should wash everyone's feet. But Jesus, he took off his robe. He girded himself like a servant, and one by one, he washed the feet of every man. I was so ashamed. How could I have forgotten this courtesy, this sign of hospitality? Well, why didn't Peter or John, why didn't they wash everyone's feet? I've never seen a man like this Jesus. He is so kind and humble, yet my heart goes out to him. My heart touches his heart, and I fear something dreadful is about to happen. Oh, Master, you startled me. I didn't know you were here. Who is this man, Jesus? You believe he is the Messiah? But he washed their feet like a lowly slave. Surely you're wrong. He can't be the Messiah.
Welcome as we continue our journey with Jesus through this last week of his life on Wednesday of Holy Week. Across the years, I have learned that final things, final actions, final words, final expressions of kindness or love are significant. What individuals say and do at the end are said and done, I believe, so we will remember what was most important to them. John, in his gospel, remembers many things Jesus said and did on that last evening of his life. Remarkably, John does not remember the Last Supper. He does not recall Jesus taking the bread and the cup at the Passover meal. Yet John remembers something that Mark, Matthew, and Luke apparently forgot, or maybe conveniently chose not to remember because they wanted to avoid it. You see, John remembers that on the last night of his life, Jesus washed his disciples' feet. Jesus, their Lord and teacher, facing a cross, chose to be the disciples' slave, washing the dirt from their feet. This would have normally been reserved for the lowest slave on the totem pole in a household. Now, I suspect on that night, every one of them knew they had dusty, dirty feet, and there was no servant present to perform this simple act of hospitality. So I guess they chose to dispense with this little ritual, since it was evident that not a single one of the disciples was willing to stoop low enough to do it. Last things are significant. Last words, last actions. Jesus is painfully aware that they all have dirty feet. Perhaps even more distressful for Jesus, he had heard them arguing that day about which one among them was the greatest, and who among them deserved the places of power when he finally chose to be the king they had dreamed he would always be. That day was not the first time they had jockeyed for places of power and the status of the most favored one. Jesus had tried to make it clear. Whoever wishes, he said, to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be a slave to all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. But like so many of Jesus' teachings, the disciples' heads were harder and thicker than even Jesus imagined, and they forgot about this connection between greatness and servanthood almost the minute Jesus said it. And so, on the final night of his life, as one of his final acts, Jesus takes off his robe, ties a towel around himself, pours water into a basin, and begins to wash the disciples' feet and to dry them with a towel tied around his waist. Peter resisted him. "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" What he meant to say, and what he would eventually say, is, "Lord, I will never let you wash my feet." Then Jesus said to him, "Peter, you don't understand this now, but you will understand later. Unless I wash your feet, you have no share with me." Then, upon the promise that there was something in this for himself, Peter enthusiastically asked Jesus to wash not only his feet, but his hands and his head. Sliding along the floor, moving from one to the next, Jesus washes all their feet. Even Judas gets his feet washed. But no one rises to take the towel and the basin to wash Jesus' feet. When he finishes, Jesus puts on his robe and one last time tries to get it through to them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your teacher and your Lord, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set the example. Truly, I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." One last time, his life running out, there is something Jesus wants to be sure they understand. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And if you are a follower of Jesus, you are not to be served, but to serve. This is hard for so many of us who desire to love Jesus, to follow Jesus, and to live like him. It is hard for us to choose to serve. Servants are not to be noticed. People take advantage of servants. Servants are often overworked, even abused. Servants only rarely, if ever, hear a thank you. Servants are supposed to be in the background, never to be seen. Servants are ordered to do what no one in their right minds would choose to do. We are more interested in climbing the ladder to success, achievement, wealth, and approval. It is hard for us to imagine coming down the rungs of the ladder we have struggled to climb to become a servant to everyone. Yet Jesus once told a story in which he tried to impress upon us that if we wanted to see him, we would find him as we served the very least of our brothers and sisters. The hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, the lonely, the forgotten, the imprisoned. Yes, Those are the people Jesus calls us to serve if we are to follow his example on the last night of his life, and if we are to understand the significance of his last words. On this Wednesday night of Holy Week, we have remembered these final words and this final act of Jesus. Hopefully, this image of Jesus washing his disciples' feet impressed deeply in our minds. This image will inspire us to do more than sit in a pew, to do more than simply read our Bibles, to do more than write checks to worthy causes, to do more than argue theological ideas. At some point, we will be inspired to roll up our sleeves, get on our knees, pour water in a basin, slide along the floor, and wash dirty feet, and discover in serving what it truly means to be blessed. Rather than talking about what it means to be a servant, I think Jesus would actually like to see us serve someone, but not just anyone, but to serve someone whom on most days we wouldn't give the time of day. If we serve that person, then I think we might just be a little closer to being like Jesus. And we might discover why this was one of his final acts on the last night of his life. For after all, final things are the most significant things. Tonight, I hope, unlike Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we will not forget that Jesus washed his disciples' feet. And I hope we will ponder long the words of Jesus. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And may we prayerfully seek to become servants in the Spirit of Jesus. Thank you for joining me tonight. God bless. Amen.